Alright guys, welcome back to What Could Go Wrong. So today going to be talking about mages. Got a couple of class guides that I'm going to be working on throughout the day. Hopefully get those up over the next couple of days. But I did want to start off with mage. Now I understand that, most people are pushing fire mage right now, especially once you get to those higher keys. But Frost is really just performing phenomenally well at these lower key levels. So I wanted to go ahead and go hit that Frost Mage. So starting off, gonna be talking about the talent trees. So first off, when it comes to your hero talents, right, you have two different options. So as it stands right now, the current majority of people are running Frostfire. I think it does slightly better damage, does a little bit more overall, and it's a little bit of a simpler rotation as well. Um, which is what I'm covering today. I haven't messed with Spellslinger. Even before Frostfire became the ultimate choice, I thought Frostfire was a lot better. I liked the design of it, and I liked the way it was built. All right. So personally, I play Frostfire. Like I said, don't play Spellslinger a whole lot, so I couldn't really speak too much to how all of that's going to work. But all in all, let's get into it. So your hero talents, obviously, this is kind of what your tree is going to look like. This is going to optimize your damage output. It's going to give you some cooldown reductions. It's going to give you a whole bunch of different things that are going to help you out. But most importantly, it's going to give you your Frostfire Bolt, and then you're going to be able to increase damages over time. All right, so again, this is what your hero talent tree is going to look like. Next up, we'll be talking about our class tree. All right, so overall, the class tree has a lot of flexibility for mages. There are a lot of different types of builds that you can go for based off of what you need. There's a lot of rearranging that you can do. Right now, this is just a very general utility um, build. But again, there are times where, you can opt out of spell steal and you can go into arcane warding, which gives you a little bit more magic reduction. Um, if you know that there are enemies who are going to run away, you can if you know there's enemies who are going to run away and you don't need a whole lot of curse dispelling, take that out, throw it into slow. Now you've got utility for that. You can go into mass polymorph. Like, you have options here for CCs and for control. All right. But go back to our build here. So with this top portion, you kind of just pick and choose what you want. But the big things, once you get these first three capstones, you're going to take all three of them. Mirror image is just a survival type ability as well as extra damage. Shifting power is going to reduce your cooldowns, which comes in very handy when you need those last 5 seconds off of whatever it is, right? And then alter time is going to be a very strong defensive. Then we go back kind of in the middle. Again, you just kind of take what you want. Right now I have more CCs and I have Shimmer, just so I can get access to another CC. So once you get your crowd controls the way that you want them and you start moving down, we hit our capstones. So as it stands right now, we're in a unique position to be able to take all three of our capstones. Okay, so it's nice, but again, Frost Nova, not always the best choice. Freezing cold, I mean, that requires you to get up and use your cone of cold a lot more than maybe what's safe for you, depending on how much survivability you have, where you're at in the gearing process. So again, you can kind of just pick and choose which one of these you want. Or again, I have all three just because ice cold, I wasn't a huge fan of at first, but not freezing and having an extra defensive is absolutely amazing. It is insane to help with my survivability, and I don't lose damage from using my ice block anymore. Okay, so having ice block that doesn't stun me or freeze me and take me out of the fight is amazing. Okay. Now, again, I have not personally used this, okay, but you can go into cryo freeze, right? So let's say we opt out of this, we go down here, and then, we'll say I take this out and I go in here. Once I press my ice cold, right, because it turns into ice cold, um, that should still operate as a healing, right? Like I said, I haven't actually tested that, so like I'm not 100% sure if it will work that way, but you know. Also, if you're doing dungeons that don't have a whole lot of casters, I do not recommend using Spell Steal. It's kind of a waste of talent. So I would drop it and go into Cryo Freeze or Arcane Warding. I generally go into Arcane Warding just because it's a little bit of a damage reduction, which is a little bit better. And in general, for our defensives, we're going to be using barriers, not necessarily pressing our ice cold. All right. But I'll reset that. Moving along into the spec tree. All right. So this is a very, very specific spec tree. Okay. A lot of this tree is built around using my glacial spike here and my flurry. Okay. It's also specifically designed to give me procs, right? It's more of an AoE build. Okay. I still do good single target damage. I still keep up on the meters, still doing okay there. But overall, this is specifically kind of designed to do good AoE cleave target damage, right? Because that's majority of what you need when you're doing keys. I'm not going to go into single target builds. I'm not going to go into raid builds because I actually do not raid. I don't do a whole lot. I don't have a need for single target builds anymore. But getting back into this. So as you start, you're pretty much going to take these first 5 talents right here no matter what, right? Then we're going to go pretty heavy into this middle section, right? And once we get done with the middle section, we're pretty much just going to go in a straight line, and then we're just going to focus on the left side of the tree, right? The only reason why we're going to go onto this, right-hand side, but the only reason why we're going onto this right-hand side is because we want Glacial Spike, okay? That is all we really care about is getting Glacial Spike, okay? Once we have Glacial Spike, we're shifting everything over here. Now, there are talents that we could rearrange because, we can get that cold front talent, which is good AoE. We can increase our frostbolt damage. We can increase that. But all in all, this is a general pretty solid Spectre build. Now, I will say that I do like having cold front, but I haven't done much changing. I started doing research into frost at the beginning of the season. I started looking into the different talent builds. I started seeing what high end players were running. And this is pretty much the standard for the high key players. All right. Um, so overall, this is what we're going to be running. Now, obviously, I have 3 different builds right here. This is just kind of something fun where this is where I just kind of went through and I just clicked talents that I thought looked cool and that I thought would be fun to play with, right? This one I copied straight from Wowhead. Okay. So the difference between these talent trees you can see is pretty substantial. Uh, but all in all, you know, this is more of like a copy from the more meta builds, whereas my Wowhead build is straight from Wowhead. I do like to change things up. If you keep playing the same talent, you keep playing the same thing, you don't really learn the whole picture of the spec. You just kind of learn one play style. Now, that's going to be what our talent trees look like. So moving along, let's get into stat priority. All right. So as you can see, my gear is still kind of trash. But if you look at my stat, so our primary stat is always going to be intellect, right? So intellect, stamina, and armor, that is really what we want. All right. So every gear is going to have these 3 on them. In reality, you want to prioritize whatever gear is going to have armor, intellect, and stamina. Okay, that's what we care about, right? Your secondary stats come secondary for a reason, right? So, with that being said, anytime you're gearing, when you're looking at stats and you're looking at what type of gear you want to grab, always, always, always go for whatever has the most armor, intellect, and stamina, right? Intellect is always the most important. Stamina is always going to be the second most important. Armor will become third because of the way our defensives work and because of the way intellect and stamina benefit us. That is what's more important overall. All right. Now, getting into our secondary stats. So first up, we have crit, right? Everybody knows what critical strike is. Haste increases our attack speed and how fast we cast. Mastery does a lot for us, okay? It's going to, so casting the Frostbolt, Ice Lance, or Flurry grants you an Icicle, and basically it's just damage increases for our icicles, right? Next up is versatility, increases damage and healing done, and well, I have a tertiary stat which is speed, but that is really what we're looking at. Okay, now with that being said, priority wise, haste is going to be first, okay? Because we want to be able to cast faster, and haste is directly tied into a mage's global cooldown. So the more haste we have, the faster the global, the more spells we get off, the more spells we get off, the more damage we do. That is super important because a lot of our abilities are instant casts or proc based casts, but they still generate a global cooldown. Because of that global cooldown, we have to be able to get more spells off faster. All right. Next up is crit. Because at the end of the day, when we're throwing all these spells out, we want to have a good critical strike chance, because if we're throwing off 5 spells a second, right? And we have a 20% chance to crit off of that 5, right? Then let me do some easier math here. If we're doing 20 spells a minute at 10% critical strike, that means that 2 of our spells are going to be critical striking every minute, right? Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when you when you double the amount of damage that we're doing with those critical strikes, then those 2 spells are now carrying our damage every minute, right? So, with that being said, crit and haste are going to be the 2 big things that we want to look for, right? Obviously, we want our 3 primaries, and then crit and haste are second best options. Next up is going to be mastery, right? We don't need a whole lot of mastery because the diminishing returns and the amount of icicles that we get and the amount of damage our icicles do compared to being able to cast faster and critical strike more often, it's just not evened out. Okay, so that's why mastery is going to fall off. I know you read it, it looks good, it's like, oh man, why would I not want to do this? But overall, more spells equals more damage, which means haste and crit is going to benefit more. Mastery would probably be a single target if I had to guess. You would probably want a pretty good amount of mastery for single target, especially if you're going to sit there and do a lot of hard casting, which frost mages don't really do. And finally is going to be versatility. Versatility isn't a huge benefit for us. I mean, the amount of damage that we get, and or the damage increase that you get plus the damage decrease, it's not enough. It doesn't stack very well overall. All right. So there's our stats and our talents. Let's go into our defensive rotation. Okay. So I know my tabs here are a little bit chaotic down here, but if you look, I have all of my primary defensives here. Okay. This is also where I'm going to get into key bindings. Okay. Now, key bindings can be super important. Okay. So my primary 3 defensives, right? Ice barrier, mass barrier, ice cold. Okay. Now, the reason why I say these are the primary 3, they are the primary 3 solely because they're what you're going to use most often. Okay. Alter time is a good defensive if you know what's coming, but it can be difficult to get the timing of that down. I've been playing a mage for a long time. I still have a harder time with alter time. primarily used it during raids. I've only just recently started using it during keys. Um, it is super simple to understand how it works and how to use it, but if you're struggling to understand how the key works, it's not really going to be the best defensive. Uh, thus far, I think I've used it in Dark Flame Cleft a couple of times, and I don't really think I use it anywhere else just because I am still trying to get the hold of what damage is coming in and what is the best defensive to use, right? All in all, though, still a good defensive to have on point. Okay. Next up, greater invisibility. Greater invisibility is more of a drop aggro defensive. Okay. Maybe the tank dies and the whole group just comes running at you. If you use your greater invisibility, you can drop that aggro. If the tank has been able to be battle resed, then that means that he's up and he's able to pull that aggro right back off of you. Or, maybe the tank goes down and then the healer goes down and everything comes running at you and everybody's trying to get away because we got to be able to do something, like we got to get back to where the tank is at. You can use your greater invisibility, right? And it drops that aggro. You take reduced damage and you're good, right? Gives you a chance to survive whatever's going on. Because as everybody knows, death timers will kill you. They will kill your key. So, in general, having greater invisibility prevents the death. One death prevented, that could be up to, I think it's 7 seconds, 15 seconds with Challenger's Peril. I don't actually know. I haven't done a whole lot with Challenger's Peril, but yeah, 15 seconds from a death. Okay, so having that death timer, it is a little rough. Also, ignore the keys. Haven't done a whole lot this season on my mage, just because. I'm just gonna be honest with you guys. Key drops hate me. Okay, I will literally go an entire week and only get the same 3 keys, and then I just do the same 3 keys for the entire week, and I'm just like, why am I only doing 3 keys? But yeah. So I've done. I think there's only 2 dungeons I have not done yet this season between my 3 characters, but it is what it is. It happens. Okay. Um. Anyways, back on topic. Defensives. Okay. So that covers alter time. That covers our greater invisibility. Ice barrier. You should have it up on cooldown. Right. Be using it on cooldown. Okay. Mass barrier is great for AOE. I have a weak aura that it pops it up on my screen. It pops up like right over here. Says AOE incoming, or I have a little voice prompt that says AOE incoming. Oops. AOE incoming, and then I have a little box here where the timer sits right there. I wait until there's about 1 second left, and then I pop my mass barrier. What that essentially does is it gives your healer a chance to finish ramping. It, it gives them a chance to pre-heal everybody. I know that Discipline and Resto druids, so Discipline Priest and Restoration Druid, those 2 will benefit greatly from that mass barrier. Just because it gives them a chance. Discipline has a chance to finish that ramp. Once they get the ramp done, they get their radiances out, they get their big heals going, they get everything going. Everyone has a chance to stay decently high, and you don't risk losing a death or losing somebody because the healer wasn't ready for the AoE. The druid didn't have time to get their hots out, like whatever the case may be. Mass barrier, that's pretty much what you want to use it for. Okay. Ice cold, generally speaking, this is for oh shit moments. Okay. My ice barrier still has 2 seconds left. My cold snap is still on cooldown. My shifting power isn't there. I'm already at 40% health. You pop that ice cold, reduce 7 damage for 6 seconds. That 6 seconds, you get your ice barrier back, pop your ice barrier, your healer has a chance to get you healed back up because you're taking reduced damage, you're helping or you're shielding yourself for damage. Like, it is just overall primarily how you want to use ice cold. Okay. If you know there's big damage coming in and you don't have anything up, yes, use ice cold. But at the same time, if you already know the damage is coming and you already know you're going to get hit pretty hard and you already know that you don't have a barrier or another defensive up, pop your altar time. That's the best way to handle your defensives. Okay. So as a mage, you have a pretty good toolkit for defensives. You have a pretty good toolkit for staying alive. You just kind of have to think about what you're doing, and you can't necessarily be reactive. You need to be proactive with your defensives, and I highly recommend getting a weak aura to help with the callouts that you get from your DBM or your big wigs, little wigs, whatever you're using. Get a weak aura that calls out incoming damage because that can be a big game changer for you. All right. Next up, let's go into the CCs and the AOE or the CCs that we have. All right. So the big ones that I run with is going to be Dragon's Breath, Blast Wave, Ice Nova, Frost Nova. Okay. These are the primary ones that I'm using. Okay. Now, Dragon's Breath is very good, but it does require some range. Okay, so this is nice in Prior of the Priory. Yeah, Prior of the Sacred Flame. Okay, the last boss, they get in, you can disorient those enemies, gives the tank a chance to get them all pulled in. That can be a very difficult time for tanks, especially if you have a group of pumpers pushing out big damage. All right. Next up, Blast Wave, right? And also with Dragon's Breath, be careful because it does kind of require you to get in close. So because you're having to get in close, it can be an issue. But if you have like some caster, a group of casters, excuse me, if you have a group of casters or you have something that you can get close to, you're gonna take that damage anyways. Again, Dragon's Breath is a great CC, and that's 4 seconds of damage that you're avoiding, possibly more depending on their cast times. Okay. Blast Wave. This is great for if they're already coming at you. You don't really have a whole lot to do, but you can knock them back, right? You can knock them back towards the tank, or you can kind of reposition people depending on how you're standing. This is good for keeping enemies back. This is good for moving the enemies closer to the tank where you want them to be. Any number of different reasons. Blast Wave is one of the better, in my opinion, because it is a movement reduction. It does damage and it realigns people to help the group out even more. Okay. Next up is Ice Cold. So Ice Nova. Wow. Ice Nova is good for getting out of places and for running away, or it's good if you need to just like kind of get everybody in one spot. Okay. A lot of times I use Ice Nova more with Blizzard, Frozen Orb, Comet Storm. Okay. Not always, but majority of the time. Okay. That is a big reason why I do that. Okay. Or why I use it. There are other uses. I don't use it for the other uses. A Dragon's Breath and Blast Wave are my primary two, like, deal with it. Ice Nova and Frost Nova. In general, I'm using those to boost my own damage for my AoE of effects. Okay, that is pretty much what I use those two for. Not exclusively. There are other uses. Frost Nova, if you have to get away, if the tank loses aggro, if the tank dies, if there's something going on and you're struggling, boom. Frost Nova can help as well as Ice Nova. Okay. They have other uses, but the primary use that I'm using them for is to boost my damage. All right. Polymorph is great for that caster who's just outside of everybody's range, is just sitting there just smacking you. Boom. You know, uh, throw a polymorph on that guy. Save your group. Help him out. Okay. Next up is going to be our cooldowns. So, obviously, Time Warp. Hero, Lust, whatever you want to call it. The strongest cooldown for a mage. The best one to use, but make sure you're using it at the right times. Okay. Bosses, big trash packs. When your group calls for it, however it is. If you're not super confident, hey, I don't really know when to lust. That's cool. All you have to do is tell your group, hey, can you call for lust? Hey, can somebody tell me when to lust? Right? That in and of itself, most groups will be like, yeah, I got you, no worries. There's always somebody there who is willing to help you, who is willing to like show you. One big thing I've noticed is just be honest with the group. Like, hey, not super confident on a mage yet. Could use some help with, when do I lust? Most groups are going to do that for you. Okay. Next up, mirror image. Okay. Mirror image is going to be something you want to use primarily when you're out of ways to deal with aggro, but you have aggro anyways. You can pop it. The aggro will go for your mirror images first, give you a chance to kill whatever you need to kill. Outside of that, this is pretty much the way I use it is primarily going to be a single target cooldown. Boss fights, mini boss fights. Occasionally I'll use it in AoE, but the vast majority of time it's not really benefiting you as much. It's just giving you some good single target damage. But overall, a very good cooldown on a very short reset timer. All right. Skip over Icy Veins. I'll come back to that. Next up is going to be Frozen Orb. Frozen Orb is phenomenal for our AoE. It rushes in. Okay. It's doing AoE damage. While it's doing AoE damage, there's a talent point that we take. That Blizzard reduces the cooldown. So when you are get away from this guy here. When you are running your Frozen Orb, you essentially can have almost 100% uptime just because of the way talents interact. That is one of our strongest AoE damage dealers and is one of the best ways for us to do damage. All right. Next up is going to be Comet Storm. Comet Storm is a great AoE or single target damage dealer. Okay. In general, we're using Comet Storm with a talent. Let me remember what it's called. Um, I'll have to find it. But there's one of our hero talents in the Frostfire tree causes Comet Storm to also make a meteor fall. Okay, so when that meteor falls, it does additional damage. It leaves a burning ground around that does AoE damage, and on top of that, we have talents increasing our fire damage. So now this fire is doing even more damage. This is a phenomenal cooldown on a 30-second timer that we can use every 30 seconds, and we are blowing through AoE and single target damage because while we're casting, we're still doing damage. We're still hurting the enemy no matter what. All right, makes it one of our stronger offensive cooldowns. All right. Icy Veins. This is great to use with Lust, but this is something you want to use if we have to hardcast. Okay. Essentially, what it does, it gives us a couple guaranteed procs, gives us a water elemental, and it increases our casting speed. Okay. Also gives us haste increase. Okay. So just with that alone, you'll see that there are down points in our procs and we have to hardcast. Well, when we're hardcasting, it gets a little bit tougher to keep up with everything going on. Okay. When we're hardcasting, majority of the time, that also means that we are only doing single target damage and we're falling off on damage in general. Okay. It happens. You're going to have down points. We're not 100% proc based spec. Okay. It is what it is. Kind of sucks a little bit, but at the same time, it's still really solid. Okay. Now, I forgot to go over this when I was talking about our utility. So the only thing I don't have keybound is Frost Nova and Polymorph. The only reason why I don't have them keybound is because I don't use them enough. Don't have a need to use them enough. But I do recommend your CC, your crowd controls, get them keybound somewhere. Okay. Next up with our cooldowns, shifting power. Just gonna drop cooldowns. I wouldn't necessarily call it a cooldown. This is more of like a utility thing, a personal utility. But I have that keybound. I have my lust keybound, so it's a very simple matter of I move my finger from one area, one key over. Now I'm able to pop lust. Same thing with my counter spell. I'm able to interrupt spells very easily because we are doing a lot of moving around as a frost mage because we're very mobile. It's not very often that we have to hard cast, but it does happen. So majority of the time you're running around, you're throwing off spells, you're repositioning constantly. It's very easy to lust and counterspell with R and F, in my opinion. As far as my defensives go, I use my other keyboard. Because again, if I'm running around, I have everything keybound, I don't need to. I don't generally have my hand on my mouse. So, again, first up, I have Fire Blast set as my keypad for 1, then 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? To me, that's just a little bit easier. I have Fire Blast down there because it's a good way to generate a proc. Every now and again, it does some increased damage. It's just a nice thing to add into the mix, okay? Now, let's get into our rotation, okay? So, starting off, unless you are going into combat with a proc, you're going to always start with one of two things, okay? If it is 3 or more targets, you're going to throw your frozen orb. If it is 3 or less targets, you're going to start with flurry, okay? Here's why, all right? More than 3 targets, you want to get your blizzard down as fast as you can. Blizzard is a 1.6 second cast. When frozen orb is out, it's free. And it's resetting the cooldown of Frozen Orb, which is one of our strongest AoE offensives, right? So we're Frozen Orb for, I'll just go through 3 or more targets, right? We're going to have Frozen Orb, Blizzard, Comet Storm, Flurry, Ice Lance, Flurry, Frost Firebolt should be up, Frozen Orb's back out, then we should have a Glacial Spike, okay? In general, the way our procs work, and I'll show the rotation in just a moment here, but the way that things work, it is going to go pretty smoothly. You want to be getting out all of our instant spells. We want to get to a point where we have to hard cast something. Best way to do that is by sending it out. Okay. So again, with more than 3 targets, Frozen Orb, Blizzard, Comet Storm, Flurry, Ice Lance, Flurry, Frostbolt, whatever's proccing, Frozen Orb, Blizzard. Frozen Orb and Blizzard should be used on cooldown. Okay. I will add that in there. With more than 3 targets, these should be used on cooldown, even if it messes up our rotation. Right? So it'd go Frozen Orb, Blizzard, Flurry, Ice Lance, Flurry, Frozen Orb, Blizzard, Frostbolt, Frostfire Bolt, like whatever the case may be, like that. With less than 3 targets, we're going to Flurry. We're going to do whatever is proccing. Then we're going to Comet Storm, Flurry, Frozen Orb, Blizzard, proc. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Flurry, proc, Comet Storm, proc, Flurry, proc, Frozen Orb, Blizzard, proc, so on and so forth. Okay. So with 3 or less targets, show you how this is going to look. Not going to incorporate defensives into this because there's no real need, because defensives are too situational and it is player to player. All right, so I'm going to Flurry, Comet Storm, Frozen Orb, proc, 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 Blizzard, no procs, Glacial Spike, proc, 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 Flurry, Glacial Spike, Comet Storm, no procs, Ice Lance, proc, Frostfire Bolt. Frostfire Bolt. There we go. Glacial Spike. Flurry. Frostfire Bolt. Frostfire Bolt again. And so on and so forth. Okay. Essentially, that's what we are looking at when it comes to our 3 targets or less damage profile. Not exactly a perfect science, not going to be where we're doing our best damage. Frost Mage is actually going to do better damage with more targets. We want to be closer to that 5 range of targets is really where we're going to thrive. Now, 1, 2, perfect. We have 5 targets here. All right. Let me wait for everything to drop off here. Now, when we go into 5 targets, again, Frozen Orb is our priority, and Blizzard is our priority. So as often as they are off of cooldown, we're going to use them. Outside of that, okay, this is what your rotation should look like. Frozen Orb, Blizzard, Flurry, Comet Storm, Flurry, Frozen Orb, Blizzard, Procs, Hardcast. Okay, so got all that. So we're going to Frozen Orb. We're going to drop Blizzard.
I don't have a target.
We're going to Flurry, Comet Storm, Flurry, Blizzard's back up. Now we're going to get rid of our procs. Now we're going to Glacial Spike. Now we're going to send our Frozen Orb, and we're going to Blizzard, and we're going to get rid of our procs. We're going to Flurry. We're going to Hardcast. We're going to Blizzard again. We're going to Glacial Spike, get rid of our proc. Now we're going to Comet Storm. Proc, Frozen Orb. Drop the Blizzard. Procs. Drop a Blizzard. Hardcast and proc. And then we're just going to sit here. And we're going to be hardcasting. We're going to drop our Blizzard. Get rid of our procs. Hardcasting. Going to Comet Storm. Drop another Blizzard. Hardcasting. And just rinse and repeat.
I need a target.
Same thing almost every time. All right. So that is essentially what it's going to look like. And as you can see, my damage is over 1 million compared to the about 700k I was getting before. So again, you do want to have a tank who can pull more and who's going to pull more. You're going to have things like icy veins and time warp going for you. You're going to have your trinkets. You're going to have good amounts of all of that. Okay. Now let's get into single target damage. So our single target rotation is actually pretty simple. Okay. At the beginning of our fight, Lust, Mirror Image, Icy Veins, Comet Storm, that opener is what we want every time on bosses. Okay. Reason why is Lust stacking with Icy Veins is going to give us faster casting speed. We're not going to get as many procs in our single target. Then our mirror images are going to give us good, strong, consistent damage through while we're getting through everything. Then Comet Storm gives us a nice little burn to keep on them. So the only thing I'm skipping on this is I'm not going to time warp. I'm not going to pop Icy Veins. Everything else will be the same. Okay, so beginning of a single target fight, pop those 3. Next up, get rid of your get rid of your instant casts and your procs ASAP. That's what you're looking to do. Okay, so it would look like Flurry, any procs, hard casting Frostfire Bolt, cast your Glacial Spikes, hard cast. Flurry's back up, pop Flurry. Okay, so we're gonna mirror image, drop our bolt, or Comet Storm. Flurry, no procs. Oh, Flurry procs for us. Glacial Spike. Flurry. Frostfire Bolt. We're just sitting here and we're hard casting a lot, taking our procs as they come. All right. It's not a perfect system. Not always going to work out. I don't know why my mirror images are glitching out on me. But you are going to get more procs the more with Time Warp and with Icy Veins, you'll get more procs. But again, anything less than 3 targets is not really where we're going to thrive as Frost Mages. But there you guys have it. That is really it. If I forgot anything, or if you have any questions, please throw it in the comments. I will be sure to answer it. I can make follow-up videos. Perfectly fine with that. But again, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Have a good time. Enjoy, like, and subscribe. Have a good one. See y'all later.